Windows has been in the news recently for all of the wrong reasons, and that's not even mentioning half the shady stuff Microsoft has been up to in other areas. But as a side effect of all that, Linux is once again having some time in the sun. Now, this isn't the first time people have claimed a new dawn for the Linux desktop, but things definitely feel different this time. Previously, a massive hurdle for Linux adoption has been the lack of support for games. Wine has existed for ages, but with pretty varied results. The recent effort of Valve in getting Proton and the Steam Deck into the mainstream has meant most games that were originally built for Windows now just magically work in Linux. So whatever the reason, now is a great time to give Linux a go. And that is exactly what I did. Let me share my experience migrating my game development setup from Windows 11 over to Bazzite Linux. It's no secret that there's about 1 billion different Linux distributions to choose from. When I first gave Linux a go, it was over 20 years ago, but some of the popular distros are still the same. I was using Ubuntu, and back then, they'd ship you a CD with the latest version of it every 6 months. That's not really a thing anymore, but Ubuntu lives on. This time around, I chose a more modern distro, Bazzite. Bazzite has a strong focus on gaming and overall stability for day-to-day stuff. Plus, I like that it's immutable, so if there's ever an update that breaks everything, I can just roll back to the last version that worked. Before I made the giant leap, I wanted to test out Bazzite for a couple of weeks first. So I created a small partition and installed Bazzite there so that I could dual boot both Linux and Windows. Once the installation was done, I installed all of the stuff I use for day-to-day game development. Some apps I could install via Bazaar. Bazaar being the kind of storefront for apps that comes with Bazzite. I use Inkscape for drawing vector art, and it can be found in Bazaar. Same for Obsidian, the app I use for note-taking and writing scripts for videos. In fact, here's the script for the video you're watching right now. One app that didn't have a native Linux version was the one I used to write my music, FL Studio. Other music apps like Reaper and Bitwig do have native Linux versions, but I really like FL Studio, so I wanted to stick with it. I got it installed using an app called Bottles, which is available in Bazaar. Bottles has a preset for FL Studio, but I think the URL it's using for the installer is out of date. I had more success just downloading the latest installer myself and then running it manually in Bottles. It did take a while, but at the end of it, I had a working FL Studio. Actually, I tell a lie. I did have to turn on some extra permissions in Flatseal before it could access the music source files in my game project directory. Okay, next up was Acebright, which I've recently started using the Steam version. Steam is installed by default in Bazzite, so I just had to sign in and install Acebright. I also use the Steam version of Godot. For Brave as Coconut, I don't use .NET and I just stick to the current stable release, so the Steam version is fine. However, when I'm working on my Dialog Manager add-on or any of my example projects, I do use the .NET version of Godot. I also tend to bounce between versions, including betas and release candidates, to keep ahead of what's coming and make sure things work for a wide range of people's possible setups. For that reason, I just download and run those versions of Godot from the files themselves. But for some reason, running Godot this way would only recognize my GPU in the project launcher, but not once I opened the project from it. What I discovered though, was that if I ran the editor from the command line to directly open a project, it was fine. That was a little annoying, but easily worked around. And then I thought of a way to make it a little bit nicer. Dolphin, the KDE file manager, lets you add arbitrary custom commands to the context menu. So I made one that opens the current folder in Godot. If you're interested, I've written a little guide on how to do that I've made available on my Patreon. It's having the power to do stuff like this as a built-in thing that makes me love using Linux. Obviously, not everything is easy or perfect, but I have to say that most stuff has been really smooth. Most, but not all. The one pain point at the moment is DaVinci Resolve Studio. Resolve has a native Linux version and the Bazzite README specifically mentions DaVinci Resolve, but so far I've been underwhelmed. I installed it with the recommended install resolve command, and that created and provisioned a distro box with all of the stuff that DaVinci needs. And once that finished, I could open it and edit video, which seemed fine, but it seems I have about a 50-50 chance in any given action to completely lock up DaVinci and need to hard reset it. I have read about the Linux version of Resolve being something of an afterthought, so that's a shame. I do think I'll keep tinkering with it here and there to see if there's any way of fixing it, but for now I'm pretty impressed by Kdenlive as an open source replacement. In fact, I'm editing this video right now with Kdenlive. So, with my curiosity satisfied, the last step was to completely remove Windows from my machine. And for good measure, I also did a fresh install of Bazzite. I'd taken a bunch of notes while I was experimenting, so I had my whole setup back up and running again in about an hour. I am very happy with the overall results of the experiment. Linux just feels faster, cleaner, and more powerful than Windows. Everybody's tooling and workflows are different, so your mileage with Linux will vary, but if you're curious, I definitely recommend trying it out on a small partition and giving dual booting a go. And if you have given Linux a go or want to try it out, then leave a comment below and let me know how you go. That's about all on that, but before I go, I'd like to thank my Cockatoo patrons. And now I need to get back to working on Brave as Coconut, so I'll see you all again soon. Bye.